開校上皇下落校、公明運来、南紀へ。Thank you for joining us this morning for today's service. Today is also the actual beginning of this Oshigan week. So we'd like to continue to honor our ancestors. Let us start today's service by sharing a few minutes of silent meditation. Namu Shakamuni Butsu Shogenzo Shinfuzoku Namu Shakamuni Butsu Renge Misho Zenzuda Namu Shakamuni Butsu Atsunai ga Henyu Nehan Shariai mo Ishin Choraiban Tokurenban Shugo Sotugyo Nyurenjak Ryoto Daichi Donjo May this humble merit of reciting the sutras, offering the incense, flowers, sweets, and candles, our time, our presence, our thoughts and good wishes, all be extended through our lives, to our loved ones, our families and friends, to the people in our community, to all people, to all sentient beings. Maybe together with them attain the Buddha. Namkie O. Namkie So. I would like to share with you something. This is Little Tokyo. Last night at 5:30, we gathered at 2nd and Street and San Pedro, and I heard that this was for the memorial service of those who passed away in a nursing home. And I heard there's going to be Reverend Ito from Higashi Honganji that I deeply respect. So I wanted to support him. I learned when I went there that it was also a campaign for sort of against Pacifica, the new company who acquired the Pesquero facility. And I felt the pains of the families, also the community members. We took a walk from the second San Pedro, as I said. And this is another thing I was asked to go. One of my Cambodian friends asked me to leave a public comment at the City Council of Long Beach when this councillor representing the Cambodian community, Dr. Suli Saro, made a recommendation to, I guess, condemn this series of hate crimes. Secretly, Mr. Chok Lim invited me to this gathering at MacArthur Park on Anaheim. Many people gathered here as well in response to the recent, I guess, reports and news. Right. So this is what I saw quite a few people. I saw another Cambodian monk present. For Buddhist, some people point out that we don't respond like the time when the Black Lives Matter movement happened. Asian peoples are known for less sort of assertive, that we sort of contain this. I believe that must have been the case in the internment camp. People were sent, and then this kind of lingering harassment or aggression or experience. I wasn't not there, but you were there watching your parents. So I feel less qualified even to talk about it. Nonetheless, people asked me to go out there, especially as some of them knew the history of Japanese American community. So this is what I shared, both at the public comments of the city of Long Beach and also this assembly. And you can always advise me, guide me if my perception is still insufficient. With our grandparents' generation, the grandparents' generation of the community, having gone through the experience of internment camp and continued harassments, sign of aggression, or bias or discrimination, racism after the war, which was also directed to the children generation as well. We need to prevent, by all means, the recurrence of this tragic cycle of hate and anger. But their way to fight back was to serve people, serve this community without discrimination, bias, and hatred. Their way to change the course of their future was, as demonstrated by our parents and grandparents, is to contribute to our society, country, and the world with resilience, diligence, cooperation, and kindness. As a Japanese individual who myself coming from Japan through Canada, I see the multiculturalism of Long Beach City. I always knew this city is one of the most multicultural cities in the United States. It is the greatest, one of the virtues, one of the appeal for many. So I said I would fully support effort from within this community to stop the cycle of racism, discrimination, hostility, and violence, which we now see as being directed towards the most vulnerable population. This is a common understanding among Buddhist teachers that we are not fighting to exacerbate, to amplify the anger, to amplify the dualistic us versus them way of thinking. So that's why we are often careful about demonstration, about campaigns, because often as you seek more for the truth, you start to realize there is no individual, but it's this inherent nature of anger, ignorance, craving. And when it comes to a point like this, when there's reports from the news, through the news we see in the campaign against Pacifica, this is so true as you put yourself through this sort of experience that it goes back to the source of anger, hatred, and delusion. The more assertive we become, there's a risk to delude ourselves with a one-way thinking. And it's a difficult thing to swallow for those who who need somebody to point their fingers and says, this is the bad guy, this is the bad people. We are so tempted to do. Even this campaign last night, the first few minutes, I had this mixed feeling. But then I had an opportunity to share my own thoughts with the teacher, lay teacher, Jan Ford. She leads the Empty Moon Sangha, James Ford's wife. lay teacher, how we would best respond to the surge of emotions, because the emotions are there for good reasons. There's causality. And she gave me a very beautiful expression that we are a dewdrop, the ocean of compassion. So, however we are there, allowing ourselves to be present, we're touching them as a dewdrop of the ocean of compassion. When we take actions, I'm sure that I would probably be in the newspaper because many people are taking pictures. In a common Buddhist view is that we are not there to enhance the fight. We are there to calm the cravings. But at the same time, as I myself went through some difficult time with the system of this country, I felt it was a responsibility to be there, to listen to the pains. Again, this is so true. Anger, hatred, it's just the other side of the coin. If you see the other side, there's so much grief and sorrow. And that is what we have to stay in touch with. And that's the responsibility that I felt by participating in these events. So I'm just grateful that I was able to be there, listen to their story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's so good to see you all again. Thank you for your patience with me as I have to be away sometimes these weeks. So thank you, Sensei, for sharing your experience of the practice of presence in suffering, right? I'm very aware of my my birth here in the United States as a Western white woman, and I feel responsible for much ignorance. I'm sorry, I feel overwhelmed because it's lately, especially during the pandemic, we have been shown so much suffering. And I'm very fortunate to be a part of this church and these church leaders who recognize that in addition to the practice of presence, a great way to heal our grief is to use our hands. And our Ofukuwake project was born this month and is the fruit of much effort, much compassion, much reflection, and many hands. I wanted to mention that I've came across a reading this week about bodhisattvas, and I recognize you all as bodhisattvas. I hope you recognize yourselves as such, as an ideal, right? Bodhisattvas extinguish the three poisons and exercise presence over causes and conditions by guiding others, by living their vows with skillful means, with perseverance and goodness, wisdom and attentiveness to the Dharma, with the excellences of generosity, morality, effort, patience, concentration, and discernment. This is a long reading, by the Buddha Shakyamuni from the Greater Pure Land Sutra. So I just wanted to give you a flavor and to give you the opportunity to reflect on your contribution to the Ofukawaku project as the work of intentional bodhisattvas, relieving suffering of those who may increasingly feel isolation, and now even more so in the pandemic, and even more so if they turn on the news, they may feel new fears or amplified fears. So I took note during our service this morning of the phrase, sentient beings are like valuable flowers. And Sensei repeated that 3 times with other analogies to valuable flowers. We are all valuable flowers. And the 2 pieces of the Eightfold Noble Path that spoke to me this morning were right understanding, that my contribution to the well-being of all communities is that I practice my life without prejudice, that I practice my life without superstition, and that one of the reasons why I chose this path is to free myself from my own delusions. So I thank you for your support in my pursuit of right understanding. And the second is right endeavor to overcome ignorance. And I thank you for your role, your presence on my path of right endeavor. Thank you. はい、ありがとうございました。
はい、ありがとうございました。トシさん、Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I'd like to share just a couple more messages. One's from Ito Sensei, and one is from Kojima Sensei about Ohigam. It's my little. I'll be sending out notice messages from ministers from all the Butsuren Buddhist Federation, and in hope that we'll find it meaningful. And the title this time is called Kokoro no Kate. The title of the booklet is called Kokoro no Kate. That's the title ministers used some time ago. You may still remember. And there was a kind of quarterly, there's a booklet, a messages that came from the Federation. So we intentionally used that title on this occasion. And this one's from Ito Sensei. I'm sure many of you know see his face. I'll just read it. I think it's nice to just be in touch with their messages. Although you'll be reading it, you'll be able to read it in the booklet I'm sending out Monday. Rinban Noriaki Ito. With the coming of the vaccines, we're finally on our way to put an end to this unprecedented time of living with anxiety, even fear of COVID-19. We're so fortunate to continue to learn from the teachings of the Buddha. It is at challenging times like this that we find ourselves being comforted by the lessons we have learned. I always feel so fortunate that our temple is a member of the Los Angeles Buddhist Temple Federation. It gives us the chance to learn from the different perspectives of our individual lineages and histories. Here in Los Angeles, we can be friends with many Buddhists of other traditions. We thank you for your generous support of our temples and our federation. We know that we can continue to depend on all of you for your friendship and your support. I look forward to joining you virtually or in person to celebrate Hanamatsuri, the birth of the Buddha. I was able to talk to Ito Sensei last night, and after the vandalism, many people are worried about Higashi Honganji, but he was expressing his gratitude that saying that they've been receiving so much support from all over the country. So he asked me to send thanks to our community as well. Now, one last thing, this is a little lighthearted from Kojima Sensei, which I like. I often wish that I could share the message like his often, but I also share this on the screen so you can read this at the same time. So, the reason I'm sharing this is that he asked me to translate his message into English, and I asked him if I could share his message on this occasion. And the title is amazing. It says, Perfect Joy of Sweets. I will skip the Japanese part. Oh, sorry. So Reverend Shumio Kojima, Zenshuji Soto Mission. The Ohigan season is around the corner. Well, we're in the Ohigan season. People in Japan always say, heat or chill, it only persists until Ohigan. This phrase reminds me of my great-grandmother. I used to say to her, Great-grandma, it's amazing how the weather changed, just like you said. I have a fond memory of being genuinely surprised at how the temperature changed precisely as she had always predicted before each Ohigan. When I think about it now, it certainly makes sense, since the length of the day and night shifts at this time of the year. Ohigani is a Buddhist event born in Japan. This is like a 7-day Buddhist practice week that comes twice a year for both monastic and lays. In a sense, we could say this set a precedent for events like all the awareness days or weeks, such as Road Safety Week in a modern sense, modern days. Even though we are always supposed to keep cultivating a Buddhist mindset, it is also true that our busy schedule of daily life tends to get in our way. Therefore, the Ohigan works as the awareness week for us to bring back our focus on the practice at least for a week. This was done for the first time in Japan in 806. So you could say this event has been carried out over 1200 years. And I am curious then, why for such a long time this has continued to be such an important event for Japanese people? I am personally guessing that it might have something to do with the botamochi sweets. It's commonly said that sweets are made in spring to resemble the peony flower, or botan in Japanese, and therefore called botamochi, while they are made in fall to resemble the flowers of bush clover, or hagi in Japanese, and that's called ohagi. There are also many different types across the country attributed to the styles of pounding the ingredients, types of rice, red beans, and or roasted soybean flour, kinako. The word ohagi was used as a jargon among the court ladies, while the word botamochi came from the expression used by common people. Since all the ingredients, including glutinous rice, red beans, and sugar, were extremely precious and expensive in the old days, we can easily imagine how much the court ladies and common people likewise were looking forward to the sweets they could eat during Ohigan. The Japanese proverb, "Kana kara botamochi," botamochi sweets falling off the shelf, means a windfall, and uses a pronoun to express perfect joy. I often wonder if the tradition of Ohigan continue to this day mainly because the Buddhist practice and the joy of sweets were offered to us together. I certainly believe it exemplifies the Japanese Buddhist spiritual culture. Strictness alone cannot keep us going. Sweets alone cannot keep us going. Skillfully maintaining the balance between both is the fundamental point of the Buddha's teaching called the middle way. Ohigan is a week for us to practice middle way when the sun across the center of the sky, being biased neither toward the south nor south. That was. I hope we can study the balanced way of life, enjoying the botamochi, the blessing of sweets of great joy during this spring Ohigan. I will certainly observe the tradition by offering the botamochi to the spirits of my great-grandmother, who loved it so much. Now, talking of botamochi, I have to show this to you. from last night we received the gift, and there were 3 mochi. I'm not sure if I can show it clearly. The screen is, well, with the lighting and this camera, it's probably, anyway, we have a couple that I was able to offer to the Buddha. I hope you can find Botamochi in the Tokyo Central or Japanese market. Now, finally, I'd like to share Osara Sensei's autobiography. So this has been going on. If you need to take a break, please feel free. I'll just continue on. So Osara Sensei now is in the 7th grade, going to 8th grade in school. Osara Kosai, 私の人生劇場。柔道、剣道は成果だったので、どちらかを習わなければならなかった。私は柔道を選んだ。2年生に進級し、留年の生徒が何人か私のクラスにも来た。留年生は私たちには先輩として、クラスの中でもワンマンぶりを発揮していた。Because judo and kendo are compulsory subjects, we had to take either one, and I chose judo. After advancing to the 2nd grade, we saw some senior students who failed to move up to the next grade. They acted like senior students to us, and they're very bossy in our class. その中に一人だけ手をつけられぬわんぱく者がいて、ことあるごとに難題を持ち出しており、私のところにもやってきた。Among them was one particular student who was kind of out of control, and he always caused trouble to us, including me. This is Reverend Sada in the 8th grade. So, こら、宿は坊主やげな。坊主か、クソ坊主。と私の顔を睨んだ。私は頭に来た。こいつと思ったが、その日は我慢した。I have to say, excuse my language in advance. Hey, you're the one who's the Bozu, the monk. Bozu, huh? Glaring at me, he said, Bozu is a shit. It made me mad, but I remained quiet. 次の日に柔道の時間が来た。生徒は道場に入り、稽古着に着替えて整列した。Next day, there was a judo class. All students came into the dojo and changed clothes to put a keikogi, the training uniform, and stood in line. 見渡すと例のわんぱく生徒がいた。私はよーしと思った。柔道教師、溝淵先生の号令で乱取りが始まった。私はスッと彼のそばに行き、お願いしますと両手をついて練習を申し込んだ。I looked around and spotted a student who's a troublemaker, and I said to myself, there he is. With the instruction of Mr. Mizoguchi, the judo instructor, we started a sparring session. I sneaked up to the student and asked him to do the sparring with me, saying, お願いします, bowing with both my hands on the floor. 彼は私を見ると、こいつというような顔をし、よしと言って立ち上がった。互いに襟と袖を掴んで組んだ。He gave me that despiteful look, but still accepted my request, saying, sure. We held each other's sleeve and collar to start. 前後左右に動くうちに、私は小内刈りをかけた。彼の右足が私の方に滑ると、彼は尻餅をついた。立ち上がったところに背負い投げをかけた。彼の体がドーンと私の前に落ちた。さらに立ち上がり、またいきなり背負い投げで攻めた。またドーンと飛んだ。彼は忌々しそうな顔をしていたが、私は遠慮なく次々に投げた。私はこれでいささか誘引が下がり、気持ちがスッとした。Moving forward and backward and sideways, I tried kochigari, a skill meaning small inner leap. As his right foot slid toward me, he fell down on his bottom. I then did seoinage, one arm shoulder throw right when he stood up, and he fell down in front of me on his back in front of me with a big sound. He stood up again, but then again I did seoinage, throwing him over. I could see him frustrated, but I kept throwing him repeatedly with no hesitation. With this, my stress was released and I felt really good. The picture shows him on the eighth, that's seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, eighth grade. No, sorry, ninth grade. 私は柔道が好きだった。そこで3年生になると放課後に道場に行って柔道部に入部の手続きをした。そして先輩から大いに鍛えられた。I loved judo. So when I was in the 9th grade, I went to the dojo after school and registered myself for the judo club. I was then very well trained by my senior students. 私は10歳の時、父から得度を受けた。そして漱石に入った。頭を剃られ、白衣と法衣を着て小僧さんになった。I was 10 years old when my father ordained me as a novice monk. I then was registered as a priest. I had my head shaved and wore hakue, white kimono, and robes to be a little training monk. 夕食が済むと父の前に高膳を持って行って、その上に教本を乗せる。父が箸の一本を持ち、経典を指して、一心朝来と読むと、私も同じように後を告げるのだ。同じ経典を幾度も繰り返されると退屈で、眠気がさしてきて船を漕ぐ。父が箸の先端で私の頭をポンと叩く。After dinner, I would bring a light tray to my father and placed it in front of him and put a sutra book on it. He had one chopstick and pointing at the sutra book, he read the first verse, Isshin Chorai, so I could follow him. Repeating the same sutra over and over was boring, and I would start to doze off. Then my father would tap my head with the edge of the chopstick. はっと目が覚める。また練習が始まるといった塩梅だった。練習が終わると母がまんじゅうや飴湯をくれた。寒い夜にいただく飴湯はうまく忘れられない味となっている。Waking up, we would start the practice again. After the practice, my mother gave me manju, sweet bun, and ameyu, thick malt syrup poured into boiling water and sprinkled with cinnamon. So I still remember the amazing taste of ameyu that I had in the cold night.